going to start by having a look at the front page of the Australian newspaper because we have this story on the front page of the Oz that really is a continuation of what we were hearing last week from Ben Moreton, the Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister. Now, CEOs told end activist campaigns is the headline on this story. It says Australia's peak business body has moved to reset relations with the Morrison government, urging chief executives to focus on the real virtues of business rather than fashionable social causes. Business Council of Australia Chief Executive Jennifer Westacott has also backed Josh Frydenberg's push for a surplus over stimulus and will drop its campaign against the government's big stick legislation aimed at major energy companies. Now, Campbell Newman, we did hear Ben Moreton make that speech last week, really setting down what the government wants to see from these major companies. But what do you think about these comments now from Jennifer Westacott, basically backing that position in and telling these big businesses they need to stick with the main game and not worry about these activist causes?
Well, look, the BCA clearly have tuned into the way that the government, the coalition, are feeling, and it's not before time because I think corporate Australia has been on a bit of a frolic. I'm really talking about the big end of town, and it's time to get back to reality. It's interesting, the same article quotes some polling that says 70% of people around Australia reckon they'd like to see big business or they'd like to see businesses that they work for talking about these issues. I'd say this though, if they're asked, would you like to spend more time making money for perhaps the shares that you own so you get a higher dividend, or do you want to do this sort of warm and cuddly stuff, I reckon then that would focus the mind. So look, it's good to see, but big business does need to understand that if it wants reform, if it wants IR reform, tax reform, if it wants a better business environment, less red tape, it has to argue the case. It can't leave it to the politicians.
Parnell, what do you think? Do you think that we've seen big business get too involved in some of these social causes? I mean, just last week we saw the NAB, for instance, unveil a statue to an AFLW footballer who was trolled down in Melbourne. We're seeing more and more corporate interests try to sort of get involved in this social activism. But do you think that they've gone too far and they've sort of lost sight of the main game?
Yeah, this can be really well done or it can be really badly done. And when it happens badly, it's usually because a very sort of out-of-touch marketing department makes recommendations for corporate social responsibility, which has absolutely no connection to how the community feels about things. I actually wrote my AFR column about this a couple of weeks ago. And really what you see if you sort of line up the examples next to one another is when this is executed clumsily, it actually pushes people further apart, and in fact it alienates the mass of people who really want to live sensible, middle-of-the-road lives, not sort of activist lives. You know, we saw it with Gillette. They lost, what was it, you know, about $8 billion in value off the brand following their misguided advertising campaign where they tried to hook into the concept of toxic masculinity. And the other attempts to hook into these activist causes can misfire very badly. I think the statue personally is a different matter entirely. I think that they really got it right in this case, but there are a lot of ways that they can get it wrong. And I would just say, can I just add to the polling that Campbell mentioned there? I had a look at that polling, and I know we're about 45 minutes out from embargo on this, but let's just say it was. If you go into the depths of that polling, it doesn't exactly say what the headline on the media release says. So there is other data in there which shows that people think that companies should do what they say, but they're unlikely to make their purchase decisions on that basis.
Well, that's an interesting point. So often, you know, you have to read past the headline or you have to know the question, the exact question that was asked in these cases to know exactly what that polling is telling you. Campbell, do you think that there was a lesson, though, in the federal government? I mean, we saw particularly in your home state of Queensland, you know, where the Bob Brown anti-Adani sort of convoy rolled through and, you know, had really ended in spectacular failure. Is there a lesson from some of those corporations in that sense that, you know, your average Australian, the people that Scott Morrison likes to call the quiet Australians, don't really, you know, go for this sort of virtue signalling approach that we see so often these days?
Oh, absolutely, Matt. And I think that's one of the big problems, that you do have these areas in sort of marketing and corporate affairs in large bureaucracies. And frankly, they're part of the political class, the political commentariat class. They've been to the right university, they've done the course, they've mixed with people who've become political staffers or perhaps people in the media, and everyone socialises and talks together. Everyone thinks, well, that's what everyone thinks. But if you go out to, say, in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, a place like Kalanga or Caboolture, you go to the south side to Logan, or you go to the outer ring suburbs in Melbourne and Sydney, and you find people who don't have the same views, and actually they're in the majority, not the inner city elites, not the people I've just been referring to. And really, I guess the message is for perhaps the grey hair around the boardroom table or in the executive suite, is that they really have to get out and find out what their customers are saying, what their customers really believe, what their aspirations are, and particularly though, and this is critically important on this whole issue about corporate social responsibility, at the end of the day, they've got the capital of the shareholders. And I don't care what all these new age people in the ASX or around business schools are saying, the bottom line is if someone hands over $1 of their precious hard-earned, they're entitled to expect that money be wisely deployed to get a return, whether it's through their super fund or through their own private investment. And that's what many of these companies are losing sight of. So they've got to get back to what is a corporation really all about. It's okay to do nice things. It's okay to have corporate social responsibility, put something back. But what we've seen in corporate Australia at the top end of town has been overreach. And I hope there is a reset.
Yeah, I think it's been a bit rich having some of that stuff coming from the big banks as well when we've seen the sort of conduct that they were up to that was revealed in that royal